Okay, good morning. My name is Ellen Kokinda. I'm going to open up the Staff Hearing Officer meeting of January 24th, 2024. First, we'll start with preliminary matters. Any requests for continuances, withdrawals, postponements, or addition of ex-agenda items. I do have several postponement announcements. Item A, 711 Bath Street, that was continued from the January 17th, 2024 Staff Hearing Officer meeting, is postponed to a date certain of February 7th, 2024. So we will see that project back on February 7th. So that's one announcement, and that was at the applicant's request. I also want to make an announcement about postponements for 710 East Coda Street and 712 East Coda Street. They are postponed indefinitely at the applicant's request. So more to come on that, but that is items C and D for today's hearing. Again, those will be postponed indefinitely at the applicant's request. And that's all I have for today. Moving on to announcements and appeals. I don't have any other announcements, and nor do I have any information about appeals happening. So I'm going to move on to public comment. And this is public comment for items that are not on today's agenda. So anyone wishing to speak on items not on today's agenda, now is the time to do so. Anyone in the audience? And Ms. Gu, do we have anyone via Zoom?
Via Zoom, I do not see any
Like to
raised
raise their
hands.
Okay. All right, then I'm going to close public comment for general items. And again, this is item A has been postponed to a date certain of February 7th. So we are going to start with our first project today, which is 1724 Garden Street. This is a 15,222 square foot site. It's currently developed with a 2,255 square foot, two-story single unit residence, a 524 square foot detached garage, and a 272 square foot cabana. The project consists of an 89 square foot first floor addition, a 526 square foot second floor addition, and a 390 square foot uncovered raised patio in the rear of the residence. The residence is listed on the city's historic resources inventory, constructed in the 1903 in the Mediterranean, Italian Mediterranean style. The project requires design review by the Historic Landmarks Commission and staff hearing officer review and approval of a solar access modification and an interior setback modification. The proposed total of 3,666 square feet of a development on a 15,222 square foot parcel is 84% of the maximum guideline floor to lot area ratio. And then the discretionary applications under the jurisdiction of the staff hearing officer today are an interior setback modification, again, to allow the proposed second story rear addition to encroach into the required interior setback, and B, a solar access modification to allow the 18 feet versus the standard 12 feet to be used for solar access height limitations. And this project does qualify for an exemption from further environmental review under section 15301, existing facilities that allows additions for residences, and then also section 15303 for new construction. We have Ms. Garson here to represent the project, and whenever you're ready, please proceed with your presentation.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Kokinda. Yes, Holly Garson, Assistant Planner with the City's Planning Division. So just to get started here, we have a vicinity map on the cover sheet of the drawings, and this is the general location of the project site. And here is Alice Keck Memorial Park, just for orientation. This area is a mix of single unit and 2-unit residentially zoned parcels, and the lot is approximately 15,222 net square feet, or 0.35 acres, and has an average slope of 10%. On the screen are some site photos of the front of the residence. So this is as seen from Garden Street, looking at the property. So additional photos of the front of the residence. So you can see here just the tall, mature vegetation, and there's some fencing between the property lines here. This is the neighboring property at 1730 Garden Street. Here is a photo of the rear of the existing residence. This is where a uncovered patio is proposed in this general location. And then we have the northwest elevation, and this is closest to the neighbors at 1730 Garden Street, who could potentially be impacted by the project. Here are additional views of the neighborhood. Again, just noting there's a lot of vegetation as seen from the street. Okay. Back to the site plan, you can see the existing residence here, and then the shading of the additional roof is above where my cursor is. So the project is requesting consideration for 2 zoning modifications. And the first is an interior setback modification to allow the proposed second-story rear addition to encroach into the required 10-foot northern interior setback, so along this side here. The existing 2-story residence is non-conforming to this setback. It encroaches 7 inches, and the roof eave exceeds the allowable setback encroachment by 8 inches. So the proposed second-story rear addition would jog inward slightly from the existing footprint of the residence and would encroach into the required northern interior setback by approximately 6 inches, and the roof eave would exceed the allowable encroachment by 3 inches. And you can see this clearly identified here on the site plan. And staff is supportive of the interior setback modification request because the proposed second-story addition does not exceed or match but is less than the existing non-conforming condition at the northerly lot line. Staff is supportive of the siting of the proposed addition as it is located primarily behind the existing second story, and the finished roof height measures at a lower building height than the existing second story. And the city's architectural historian, Ms. Nicole Hernandez, she did evaluate the proposed project, specifically the second-story addition, and determined that the project follows the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties, and the project will not negatively impact the resource. This project was reviewed by HLC on January 17th, and they stated that the second-story rear addition is aesthetically appropriate and acceptable as a design, and that it enhances the current residence and is sensitive to the historic resource, and that the mass bulk and scale is acceptable as proposed. Let's see. Here on this screen, we have the existing first floor plan and the proposed first floor plan. You can see the raised patio in the back and just some interior remodel work going on, and then that minor addition to the first floor. Here we have the existing second-story floor plan and then the proposed second-story floor plan, so you can see the footprint is expanding a bit here. Roof plan. Okay. Here we have the existing and proposed elevations. So here's the front comparison, and then we have the southeast comparison. Just noting the changes in area on this side and on this side. Here we have the existing and proposed rear elevation, and then again the northwest elevation, so you can see the changes in roof line, the raised patio, again over here the second-story addition. So the second zoning modification request is for a solar access height modification, and the city's solar access height ordinance regulates the height of new development on the northern side of applicable properties. The ordinance ensures your building does not cast a significant shadow on your neighbor's building so that adequate access to direct sunlight is provided. The existing second story has a non-conforming building height of 31 feet 4 3/4 inches. You can see that on the site or on the elevation here. So that exceeds the allowed 30-foot building height in this zone. So the existing residence is non-conforming to both the maximum height and the solar access height limitation currently. The proposed second-story rear addition is primarily located behind the existing second-story mass, and the roof line has a maximum building height of 27 feet and 1 inch. So that's below the allowable maximum building height for the zone. And this type of modification can be permitted where there is unusual hardship for second-story additions. The applicant is requesting to use a measurement of 18 feet versus the standard 12 feet from the base elevation point for the required solar access height limitation calculation. And that's all depicted here on the elevation. Second-story additions to existing dwelling units in the single unit zone can use the solar access height limitation requirement for other zones, such as 18 feet, if all applicable criteria are met per City Council Resolution number 17-075. So this resolution was attached to my staff report, and staff found that the project met all the criteria, and staff is supportive of this modification request. So most notably, as part of meeting that criteria, a shadow plan is required to be prepared. So that was prepared and provided here in the drawings seen on the screen. And this analyzes three times during the day of winter solstice and identifies how much of a shadow is cast from the existing residence over onto the parcel next door at 1730 Garden Street. And then it compares the added impact that the proposed second-story addition would have. So you can see on the left is the existing condition, the shadow is cast in blue. And then on the right is the additional shadow that would be cast over to 1730. And this overlays onto a portion of the neighboring existing residence just slightly, and then landscape and hardscape. And then again, this is existing shadow in a landscape hardscape area, and then this square would be the only addition. This is just later in the day, so this square would be the only additional shadow, and that's on landscape and hardscape area. So again, the same day, later in the day at 3 p.m. now, and the existing shadow is only on the subject parcel, and then there's just a tiny bit of shadow added, but again, only to the subject parcel itself. So the neighbors located at 1730 Garden Street here, they did provide a public comment letter of support for the project, stating that they have met with the applicant to review the drawings, and they were supportive of the proposed second-story addition. They were supportive of the solar access modification request and did not feel that any potential increase in shading would be a problem. And then the HLC said the solar access modification is supportable. Thank you to the applicant for working with their neighbor. They were appreciative of the shadow drawings that illustrated how the shadows would be cast by allowing the solar access modification. And this study reassured the commission that there will not be an issue with allowing the increase in height to be utilized for the solar access height limitation calculation. So this concludes my presentation, and I will be here for questions if needed. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Garson. I'd like to invite the applicant up and applicant team. If you could just introduce yourself for the record and share any thoughts about your design and kind of the intentions behind it and the thought process related to these modification requests. Thank you.
Hi, Tom Henson from Becker Henson Next Door Architects, and this is Morgan Solorio from our office.
Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. We'll try not to be too redundant. You want to go to the existing floor plans. So the house currently, the owners have 2 daughters, and they wanted a proper 3-bedroom house, one with, right now there's really no primary suite. And the third bedroom, can you go to this? Yeah. There's a bedroom in the lower left that's sort of an average bedroom size. Then they could use the one on the right as a primary bedroom, but it's still pretty small, and the closet's small, and the bathroom's small. It doesn't just meet current standards. And the bedroom in the upper left is more like a trunk room. It says bedroom, but it's something like 8 feet by 12 feet. So we needed to increase the size of that bedroom. So the logical place for it, respecting the historical architecture guidelines, would be to continue it where there's already a hip protruding to the back. And you can see on the roof plan that there's already a one-story hip going to the upper left. And we're just taking that hip and raising it straight up to be able to have a bedroom in that back corner. Yeah, maybe go to the right. Yeah, the hip that's existing above is just going straight up. So that, we've been working with Nicole Hernandez, and she said that's the way to respect the existing architecture. There's already something there, so we're just taking that and pushing it straight up. And then we're expanding over the existing one-story portion to the left of that to create enough space for a proper primary bedroom, so the house is sort of up to current standards. Also, now the kitchen is cut off from the rest of the house, and that was great in the 1900s when that was for servants, but now that's the heart of the house. They wanted to open up the kitchen and expand the family room, breakfast room, so that right now it's only, I think, about 12 feet wide. And then add the patio on the rear. Right now you have to go down the 6 or 7 steps to get to the backyard, and it's tougher entertaining. So the architecture requires that the walls generally go straight up. That's what's happening on the rest of the house. So it would be weird to have the addition step in 6 inches for these last 10 feet here, or 14 feet. So that's why we're requesting the addition, or the modification, to allow that wall to go straight through. And then regarding the height, being a historical house, it's up off the ground. It's about 3 feet off the ground. And the first floor, it's 10 feet floor to floor. It has high ceilings. So to comply with the most restrictive requirement for solar access, the ceiling would be something like 2 feet high in the addition, so it wouldn't really work. So we push most of the plate is 9 feet, but in the addition part, we're making it 8 feet, so we can comply with the 18-foot, the maximum limit with modification allowed for the solar access. So that way we're respecting the architecture and also getting the third bedroom that the owners needed. The neighbors are on board. There's not a lot of additional shadow. So this was the way, we looked at a lot of different options, but this was the way we were able to get the third bedroom, make a nice primary suite, and respect the architecture and have the support of the historical HLC. I think that's pretty much it.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to open it up to public comment. If there's anyone in the audience today or anyone attending via Zoom who wishes to speak on this item, this is 1724 Garden Street. Now is the time to do so. Ms. Gu, do we have anyone attending via Zoom who wishes to speak?
On this particular item, I do not see any raised hands for comment.
Okay. I do want to acknowledge that I did receive public comment from Grant and Anne Marie Castleberg, the neighbors of this project that whom you referenced, and that will their public comment will be part of the public record. So I just want to acknowledge that and go ahead and close public comment, as I don't see anyone else here wishing to speak at this time. So I will turn it back over. I can say that I did a partial site visit. I was able to go to see the residents from Garden Street, but didn't have access to the rear. But I understand the plans. I watched the HLC hearing. I'm familiar with this neighborhood and, the substantive images and have an understanding of the site. It is, this is a interesting project. I think I don't have too many questions. Well, maybe just one question. Do the Castlebergs have any issues with the location of windows and the interior setback? I mean, it's such a minor request for like how much it would be abetting or going into the interior setback, but did they mention anything about that in their conversation? I mean, and that was one of the things, like I couldn't necessarily see the vegetation, but I'm assuming that it's fairly substantive along that side. If you could maybe just comment on that.
Is there a picture of the rear? There is vegetation on the left side coming from the street, and the Castlebergs weren't concerned. There are already 2 windows on that elevation, so
Right.
one more window, they said, doesn't make a difference.
Yeah,
And
okay.
plus, like, you can see the vegetation. There's pretty good vegetation
Yeah,
on the left side, so.
that was kind of my guess, that it was substantive enough and that hasn't changed. So again, I don't really have any questions. This is, I really appreciate your presentation, both staff and Mr. Hudson, your presentation, because of all of the points that you're trying to address through the design of a project, not only honoring your client's desires, but trying to be sensitive to a historic resource, knowing that, you don't want to be like having to walk a fine line of and not having any kind of impact to the resource and being really sensitive to how it goes. I completely agree that it would make no sense to step in 6 inches just to come in with a conforming design, and I agree with staff's assessment on that. So I can say that, I can approve the interior setback modification, that I think it is consistent with the purposes and intent of our zoning code in the RS-15 zone, and that it really would be unfortunate to just have a slight design to bring that in 6 inches and not necessary, and that you could just continue that plane for the wall, and that it would actually be a better addition that would fit in better with the resource. So I concur with staff's opinion and how it's as drafted in the staff report. And similarly, for the solar access modification, generally I look at those with a little bit more discernment, because it does tend, can be some really rough impacts. But again, I think that you've got some challenges with this, because it's already, this residence is already non-conforming to the building height, and it's already non-conforming to the solar access height limitations. So I agree with the assessment of using that 18 feet instead of the 12-foot assessment, and how to review the project and kind of that, applying that and then being able to check all the boxes. Also really appreciate reaching out to the neighbors and really having them understand the plans and understand, like through the shadow plan, that there's really not the impact to the next door is insignificant, and that it's really not going to pose an issue that we generally are trying to protect through the solar access. So again, I agree with staff's assessment and can approve the solar access modification, saying that it's, this is an unreasonable hardship given the existing non-conforming conditions. Again, trying to walk the line of having a sensitive design to the historic resource, and then doing your due diligence and reaching out to your neighbors. So I will, those are my decisions, and I don't have any other conditions to add to this project. And there weren't any conditions in the staff report. I just want to let you know that my decision is appealable, and if anyone wishes to appeal, they would have to do so within a 10 calendar day time period. And similarly, any member of the Planning Commission, if they see fit, could suspend my decision within that same 10-day calendar time period. So, but I wish you well. You have a beautiful a beautiful project, a really sensitive design. I wish you and your client well, and think that, yeah, good luck getting through HLC and hopefully moving through the next steps. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right, and then moving on to the next item. Ms. Gu, do you mind switching screens for me? Okay, give me just a moment. Okay, so item B today is 501 East Pedregosa Street. So this is a 6,274 square foot site. It's currently developed with a single unit residence and 2 uncovered parking spaces. The project consists of constructing a new 2-car garage with a roof deck to replace the uncovered parking in the same location. The discretionary applications under the jurisdiction of the staff hearing officer at this hearing are an open yard modification to allow the open yard to be reduced by steps accessing the garage roof deck, and B, a front setback modification to allow the garage and roof deck to encroach into the in the required front setback, and an interior setback modification to allow the proposed garage and roof deck to encroach into the required interior setback. And just to note that the project is exempt from further environmental review under section 15303, new construction, and of the California Environmental Quality Act. So we have Ms. Plummer here today as the staff representative of this project. Ms. Plummer, whenever you're ready, please go ahead. And Ms. Gu, do you mind swapping back to?
Thank you, Ms. Gokinda. Again, I'm Pilar Plummer, Associate Planner with the City of Santa Rosa Planning and Zoning Division, and I'll be giving the staff presentation on this project. So as you noted in the project description, the purpose of this hearing is to review modification requests, essentially for construction of a 2-car garage on a property that currently does not have covered parking. Just as a little history before I go through some photos and overall context of the project, the modification hearing officer in 2000 approved several modifications that are very similar to what's being requested today to allow for uncovered parking, 2 uncovered parking spaces in the location of the currently proposed garage. At the time, those modifications were approved. The open yard area, which is located towards the back of the property in this corner, was reduced to allow for those uncovered parking spaces. So this application will supersede those modifications that were approved in 2000 if they are approved. Just for some general context for the area, the lot is 501 East Pedregosa Street, and it's a corner lot on the corner of Pedregosa and Emerson Avenue. And as you can see just with the site plan here, the building occupies a lot of the lot, which restricts the development envelope as far as where you can construct a compliant garage. You can see that the site, again, with two frontages of public right-of-way, are subject to 2 front setbacks. So anywhere you were to put a garage, it would be conflicting with one of these setbacks unless you were to do changes to the existing residence. So going to some photos. So this is taken at the corner looking back towards 501 Pedregosa. This is a view of the residence as well off Pedregosa. This is a shot of the location where the current uncovered parking is located. This is the residence, the adjacent property. And you can see sort of towards the back, this is where their existing raised open yard is located. These are some photos for context of the adjacent property, which is developed with a duplex. They have a 3-car garage. And you can kind of see here in this photo, there is a narrow walkway between 501 Pedregosa and the adjacent property. These are some additional photos. I guess this one here shows just an aerial view. Again, Pedregosa, Emerson Avenue. This is the property. This is their existing open yard area, which is part of the modification request being discussed today, and the uncovered parking. And just some overall views of the neighborhood context. So I can return to those if you have any questions later. So the modifications being requested again are 2 setback modifications to allow the garage to be located in the front setback, the secondary front setback off Emerson Avenue. The garage is proposed to be, and the site isn't completely in line with Emerson Avenue, so it'll be at an angle, but the garage is proposed to be 1'10" to 3 feet from that secondary front lot line, and is proposed to be on the interior property line. So they're asking for a 0 setback for the garage. Another component of the project is they are proposing a roof deck above the garage, and this is proposed for several reasons, but as I previously noted, this is the only compliant open yard on the property. While they do have areas on the property which do provide a buffer and, areas that could potentially be used for outdoor enjoyment, they don't meet the definition of open yard per our ordinance. So this is the only compliant open yard currently on the property. So the roof deck is proposed to add some additional outdoor living space on the property. So the modification, at least in terms of the open yard, is to allow the steps, which you see here, to encroach in the existing open yard. The steps are a height of 2'10", and because of that, they don't meet an allowable encroachment for the open yard. So this new area here, while it is providing some additional compensating area which can be used for outdoor enjoyment, technically the modification will be reducing the compliant open yard by 48 square feet. The project was reviewed by the Single Family Design Board on 2 occasions. I would say at the initial hearing, the Single Family Design Board asked for some more information really about how the garage was going to work on the property, how it related to the adjacent duplex. There was public comment at that meeting from the adjacent property owners and tenants, really about the potential for privacy, noise issues, light into that area. So at that meeting, the Single Family Design Board asked the applicant to, number one, provide more detail about that existing building and the relationship with the garage, as well as to look at setting back the garage roof deck. At that time, the roof deck was proposed to match the line of the garage, so it was also proposed to be a 0 setback, and they came back at that second hearing with a 3-foot setback and some trumpet vines as a screening method viewed towards that building. So in terms, and at that time, the Single Family Design Board also expressed support for the project. I will say one board member did think that, the project overall adds to an overbuilding of the site. But as far as the motion, the Single Family Design Board was in support of the project, mainly because it provides compliant parking. And I do want to note that the garage, in its current configuration, was supported by Transportation Division as well in terms of providing compliant parking on the site with 2 covered spaces. So staff is generally supportive of the garage, and I'll just talk about that first and then the roof deck. So in terms of the garage, the requirement for this development is to provide 2 covered spaces. They were given a modification previously for 2 uncovered spaces, but they'll be more compliant with the 2 covered spaces. So staff is supportive in that respect. And again, the site, because it's subject to 2 front setbacks and because the building occupies the majority of the lot, again, there's not a location they can put the garage outside of this location without doing changes, doing alterations to the existing building. The property slopes, it has a 14% slope, and there's some retaining walls as well. So it would require definitely some more modifications to the site, and it's not clear that it wouldn't require a front setback modification, for example, given that there's 2 frontages that they're dealing with. And it's also taking the space of the existing uncovered parking area. Also, if they were to push it back further from the front lot line, that would further reduce their already non-conforming open yard. That was not seen as an ideal scenario anyways by staff. So we're supportive of the front setback modification, the interior as well, because again, there's not another location for them to put the garage. For the reasons I've already noted, they are already receiving a parking design waiver for the interior clear for the garage, and transportation is supportive of that, but there's really
The width, you mean?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, the interior width, exactly. So they are going to be receiving a parking design waiver for that, transportation supportive of it, but it's a very tight area, so that's the reason why they're asking for the 0 setback as well. And also I do want to note that there's some examples along Emerson Avenue of garages either at the street or very close to the street as you move up Emerson Avenue. So there's some examples of that within the area. So it'll be generally consistent with the neighborhood character in that sense. In terms of the roof deck, so staff is supportable of the roof deck, however, less so, in the sense that a roof deck, while it does provide, an amenity to the site, definitely, it can have the concern of noise or privacy issues, I'd say particularly to the adjacent neighbor, because the location of the roof deck, because it's closer to the street, it's less likely to impact a neighbor from behind, as well as it's at the public right-of-way, so there's no noise or privacy issues at the right-of-way really. Of concern. In terms of staff support for the roof deck, it was really about the new compensating area, and that's why in the staff report there was a condition included, and that's our recommended condition, that the garage roof deck, if it is approved, be maintained as open yard for the future. Because while it doesn't technically count as open yard per our definitions, it will provide that compensating area. And it's noted on the plans, it's about 358 square feet, which will bring it closer to the actual requirement of open yard, which is 1,250 square feet. So the applicant did make some changes to the roof deck to help in terms of supportability. For example, they moved the railing for the roof deck back 3 feet from that interior lot line, which helps to provide some buffering space between the neighboring property and this property. In terms of, if they were to push the railing back either from the interior lot line more so or from the front lot line, that wouldn't really, in terms of privacy issues or noise issues, make a significant difference because it's an outdoor area. You're going to have noise regardless, and it's off their existing open yard. So moving it back really didn't make much sense. Moving it further in also could affect the aesthetic of that element. I'll just show the elevation again. And I would say the Single Family Design Board was in support of the design as is for that roof deck element. And you can see it's just a railing, so it's clear through to match other existing railing on the property. So that generally concludes my presentation on this. I can turn it over to the applicant if she has anything else to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Plummer. Yes, if the applicant could please introduce yourself and walk me through your considerations for the design, and I'm sure you've probably seen some of the public comment, and if you could respond to that, that would be very helpful. And again, we'll be opening up public comment after this presentation, but yes, if that would be helpful.
My name's Susan Sherwin. I'm the architect for the project. I think Pilar did a great job of describing, what the project is. One of the owners was here with her baby, so she's the
I
one who
understand.
She lives here and was really interested in having more outdoor open space for her family. We worked with the neighbors, or have attempted to work with the neighbors quite a bit on this. We've met with them. So there is there's housing next door, and they utilize a little front yard area as a patio. They also have a patio out and back. But anyway, we met with them. We invited them over to look and stand on our existing deck that is the existing deck that's on the house, which is here, and look over towards the site. So this is existing open parking area with a fence and a hedge. And we thought we had an agreement with them about what to do. We've also, in addition, when I was looking at this, I looked at potentially only having a 7-foot plate height for the garage to reduce the height, but I could not get, because of the narrow width of the garage, I couldn't get a garage door opener that would work. And we also looked at potentially sinking the garage, like kind of recessing it in, lower. But because of the proximity to the street, we didn't have enough room to create the needed slope to have a lower, to sort of sink the garage in. So this is what we ended up with. When we were working with the neighbors, we originally proposed a 5-foot-high fence with screening on their side to create more privacy. The owner came back, the tenants seemed to like that. The owner came back and said, I think really having just the 42-inch height would be better. She offered to write a letter of support, which I have an email from her saying that she would write a letter of support, but now she's still writing letters opposed. So their responses have been a little bit inconsistent and hard to read. But now the current letter says that the tenants are saying, well, we don't want any vines on there and screening. So we're happy to vines, no vines, screening, a higher fence, but but we would like to have the roof deck if possible. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention, Pilar looked at this, but these are all things along Emerson that have garages and roof decks. So they're not just garages, they're all garages with roof decks that are in the neighborhood. And so it's not an uncommon feature to have a roof deck right on a property line in the neighborhood. So there's, like 7 examples or 7 examples right here, just within a couple blocks. I'm trying to think of what the other comments were. One of the comments that came in was from a neighbor who is requesting that we respect the construction time limits imposed by the city, and I am certain that the owners would talk to their contractor and respect that. One of the letters is from Patricia French. This is her daughter who lives at the thing, so she and her husband, they're all co-owners of the property, and she's requesting that you support the project. And The last letter that I saw came in I saw it this morning, and somebody had done a potentially sort of a graphic of how high the new roof deck and railing would be, but it wasn't particularly representative of what we, anyway, the graphic, I think, was not maybe particularly representative of what was, so this is what we're proposing. And we are willing to work with the neighbors in terms of height and screening, if we can come to some overall resolution with them, but it's been a bit inconsistent.
And does that conclude your presentation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now I'd like to open it up to public comments. So this is for public comment for 501 East Pedregosa Street. We do have, I have one, Mr. Bob Grable, and please correct me if I've mispronounced your name. But you, hang on just one second. Let me go to, Miss Gu, do you mind swapping screens for us?
That screen's fine, the one that was up there.
Oh, I just have a timer, but.
Oh, I'm
so-
going to be quick.
Okay, well, you have 2 minutes to speak, and
Can I take the place of all the other speakers?
you have 2 minutes, but if you go over, that's totally, why don't you speak, and then, and yes, if you could introduce yourself for the record.
Okay, my
and
name is
just
Bob
share your
Grable.
thoughts.
I live in the property next to 501 Pedregosa, and our building abuts against the 501. The proposed garage, we are not opposed to the proposed garage because it doesn't restrict our small patio space that we have now. However, building a fence and a deck above it completely restricts our privacy. So as far as the garage itself, there can be amendments to the height of the garage door, I know for a fact because I'm in construction. But as far as the decking is concerned, putting another 3-foot deck or fence above it really does isolate the property that we live in. So that would be my only public comment. But the garage itself, we're not opposed to. I mean, the height of the garage doesn't affect our view, which is limited already. But as far as building a fence or doing any deck, patio furniture, planting, it really does, adding another 3 feet. If it's only 3 feet or 4 feet, all of a sudden the height becomes 12 to 15 feet, and it really does restrict, the property from our perspective. So.
Thank you so much. And may I ask, so I do know between the Single Family Design Board and this hearing that there's been questions about, again, the difference between privacy versus kind of a sense of openness and kind of differing opinions of what, and just kind of curious.
The garage itself is right on the property line. There is no setback or easement, which is fine because from the patio, our patio was raised, and we have a fence that's 3 feet above that, so we actually have an open space per se. But if the proposed garage is with a deck above it, completely isolates our patio, so we have no open space. It becomes closed. So.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, I don't see any other in-person speakers, but I do want to acknowledge for the record that I received written correspondence from Rebecca Pred, Patricia French, Laura Erickson, and Emerson Sekbon, and I hope I'm saying that right. So I will go ahead and, do we have anybody via Zoom who wishes to speak? I'm sorry if I
Actually,
cut you off.
checking Zoom, I do not see any raised hands for public comment on this item.
All right, then I'll go ahead and close public comment. Okay, so I did go out to the site, was able to kind of go up to the upper deck. No one was home, but I was able to kind of walk along and get a sense of the site and kind of on both from Emerson as well as from East Pedregosa. I guess I would like to hear a little bit more about the interior height of the garage and kind of what is the height measurement and you mentioned the garage doors, but I'm just kind of curious what, and I appreciate your input on how you considered the design and dropping the garage down below, but there were constraints with the slope and trying to get cars in and out, and that it didn't meet it. But kind of curious, is there any way to reduce the height of the garage, and what is the interior height? And Ms. Plummer, I don't know if there is any, if again for the interior height, what the limitations from transportation planning might be.
Ms. Gokinda, so in terms of the parking waivers that apply to this project, it was just for the interior width,
width.
not for the height.
Right.
And then also for the driveway as well, to be less than 20.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And if you could speak to, maybe just share a little bit more about, again, the interior height measurements.
Right, so I've got an 8-foot plate height, and I've got 12 inches, which I think is pretty minimum for the structure, for the roof and the roof decking and that type of stuff. I mean, if I can reduce that by a few inches structurally, I will, but it is, that's pretty minimal for construction. I talked to Consolidated Overhead Door about garage doors, and because of the narrow, I mean, there are potentially side opening garage door openers, but we really hardly have any space on the side, so it really wasn't going to work. They couldn't come up with something that worked with a 7-foot plate height.
Okay. And then I think one of my concerns between the adjacent property and this one is kind of I think I had more of a concern about walling it off between the two properties as opposed to allowing for more light and air. But I know that that's kind of gone back and forth. So if you could maybe talk a little bit, I'm trying to think, if the single-family design board was trying to condition it, or Ms. Plummer, or was it more just a?
No,
Trying-
I would say in terms of the single-family design board meeting, between the first and the second, it was just to explore setting it back further, which the applicant did do, and then also to look at some screening options, because I think that's often used as a tool when the single-family design board hears issues related to privacy. They want to provide some sort of actual physical buffer, but that wasn't a condition. They were just supportive of that, and I think the intent was just to have something that was amenable to both parties.
Right.
So.
Right. And again, I can kind of see privacy by being pushed back, but then again, kind of creating a wall, something walling off where that might not be as ideal for kind of being able to have a sense of openness. Can you show me the plans so that we can see how the stairs work and going up, and kind of how the current fence along the front lines up? Thank you.
Or do you want the site plan?
That's perfect.
Okay.
That's perfect. Because I'm just wondering, was there any conversation at SFDB in terms of the front railing and having that extend out? I mean, I know that's a very common pattern for other locations along this Emerson, but moving that railing into something that, again, it would take away a little bit of the open yard, but I'm just curious what the considerations are for that, and if SFDB discussed that at all.
And just to clarify, you mean setting the railing back further from Emerson Avenue?
Correct.
Yeah, no, not necessarily. I think the concern was mostly in relationship to the adjacent residential property, and not so much for the frontage on Emerson Avenue. I think staff had more concerns related to that, so we wanted to hear the single-family design board's feedback on it. But no, in general, the discussion was more in relationship to the neighbor. Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell me if there's any lighting that you plan to propose in this this roof deck area?
No permanent lighting, no.
And maybe aesthetically, what do you believe the impacts, if any, would be for moving that fence line along the roof fencing back?
Aesthetically, I mean, I don't know, when I look at the other roof decks in the neighborhood, it seems like, I mean, I'm almost thinking that I should extend the line of the roof deck, of the railing of the roof deck all the way to the far left, just so aesthetically from the front, it looks like it's continuous all the way along, because I think that would actually look better. But aesthetically, moving it back a few feet probably, I'm not sure that's going to make that much difference, but I'm not sure that it impacts anyone on the Emerson Street side anyway.
I guess I'm just wondering, bringing up the concern about having items or vegetation or planting, even if it's not permanent, but big pots or something that's, just having additional, using that space, and what the impacts might be if there is not by kind of cutting out certain portions that wouldn't be as usable.
I guess it depends on how much you're talking about moving it back. You know?
Right.
I mean, a foot or two, probably minimally, and then beyond that, yes, it starts to kind of make it quite a bit smaller than, I mean, so we've already given up, 60-some square feet by moving the railing in.
And just to add on, and I included this in the staff report, but while it's, I think from a staff perspective, we would prefer the railing to meet the 6-foot setback, it starts, as she was saying, to restrict the usability of that area. And part of the reason why we were supportive of the roof deck to begin with is it is providing some compensating area for the already non-conforming open yard. So it's actually making it larger, even though it doesn't meet the definition of open yard, so.
And I'm sorry to put the applicant on the spot, but are you aware for the outdoor area to the adjacent property? I'm sorry that the gentleman's not here anymore for me to ask, but is the back area on their property accessible to that front unit that also uses that open yard, that patio, that front patio? Are you aware? You may not know, but
If they
or
go
is
up
it-
that narrow walkway on the side, they can go up some stairs and they can go up there, yes.
but that's not predominantly for the second unit. I'm guessing they kind of split it up that way.
Quite
or-
honestly, there's zoning things going on there. There's more than 2 units on that property right now, and that's something that.
It's outside of my purview for
I
today.
know, but I'm just
and,
saying that the main use of this front space is from the unit that's not really supposed to be there, so. I know that's outside your purview, but that's just part of what's going on.
I think that, okay. So again, I walked the site. I think that, you're coming in requesting a 2-car garage. This is something that is part of within our zoning ordinance that's kind of built in for the expectation of a single-family residence. A modification was received prior for uncovered parking. I think that overall, the general design of the garage or the location of it, this site is highly constrained. There's really no other garage location off of Pedregosa Street, and nor would that be aesthetically pleasing. It wouldn't meet any of our single-family design guidelines. It makes the most sense to utilize the existing parking area to create a 2-car garage. I think I'm supportive of that element. I appreciate the railing being pushed back the 3 feet. My bigger concern is not walling it off even more. That, again, I think for kind of, these are tight situations, and all up and down Emerson, there are examples of garages and roof decks and kind of almost like it could be seen as, there's just the pattern of development along Emerson does show that this could fit in to that. I do think that it's a little different given that front patio and again, pushing that railing back. I am less interested in screening it with any kind of vegetation. That would be more of a concern. I just want to note for the record that we don't protect private views, that is something that has to be worked out privately amongst property owners, and that as part of my, I'm conscious of it because of again, just the experience of what it might be from sitting next door. So there's kind of a privacy thing, and that might, like one person might want one thing and the other person might want something else. So I'm loath to require screening at this time. I'd rather have an open railing, kind of similar to what's currently existing on site. And I think that is also, that goes for the front and for the side. And that too would be similar to other existing pattern of development of roof decks, and not, again, having something walled or having additional vegetation or making the massing kind of grow based on the vegetation. So I appreciate, Ms. Plummer, your comments about, again, I know that we're trying to achieve multiple things and trying to have a larger open yard, and that's kind of how staff could reach their support. So I can go ahead and support this design. I can support the open yard modification, that it's consistent with the purposes and intent of our zoning ordinance and secures an appropriate improvement on the lot. As Ms. Plummer wrote in her staff report, it is non-conforming by adding this area above. I do believe that you're taking already non-conforming open yard area. There's no other. If you go to the Pedregosa side, it's not the way that it's landscaped, the way that the slope works. That's not usable outdoor space, and nor does that qualify as our open yard requirement, given that it's within the front yard. So I think that it makes sense from a design standpoint that you've got a larger area that you can use, and that it's flat and kind of addresses the intent and purpose of open yard to begin with. So I can support the non-conforming aspect and kind of identifying that as part of the required open yard, or non-conforming open yard area. As far as the front setback goes, again, I think it's, the request is consistent with the purposes and intent of our zoning ordinance. You are providing the compliant covered parking for 2 parking spaces, and you were able to get transportation planning support or the waivers for the location and the width changes, so that, again, it still can accommodate the 2 cars. And agree with the fact that this site is constrained, and this is really the only area to achieve any kind of, parking to begin with, but covered parking. And just appreciate the applicant's discussion on looking at other alternatives for, again, reducing, like lowering it. And I understand that the slope and there are challenges there. So thank you for walking me through that. That thinking for the design. And the interior setback, again, it's consistent with the purposes of the intent of the ordinance, that it is providing that covered parking, and that if there's any way to reduce, I'm not going to condition it, but if there's any way to reduce the height as you continue to work through your plans, and or if there's any reduction in height, that would very much be appreciated. But you've already got a very minor, what you're requesting is relatively, is not a significant garage height. It's trying to be as modest as possible. I think that the roof deck, I support the 3-foot interior setback for the railing. So that's not, and that I would want a condition that you're not putting any kind, like that area be clear of objects. And can appreciate the single-family design board's input on the supportability of the aesthetics of that, and that it's not going to be too detrimental, but that hopefully that kind of creating a little bit more buffer space will provide a little bit more privacy, at least kind of seen in over that railing. But I do want to condition that the railings, I'm wondering, like, I'm curious as to, for a conversation at SFDB, I'm interested, Ms. Plummer, in conditioning it that the railings must remain open, but do you think that's going to cause a problem at the single-family design board?
Ms. Kokinda, so I think, again, a lot of the discussion has been to work with the neighbor and to find a solution that works. So if the neighbor is requesting that it stays open to provide light, again, I think that that's something that they can understand. And again, if it's something the staff hearing officer thinks is appropriate, I think they would.
So that's so then I'm gonna add that condition that the railing, both along that, in kind of parallel to the interior lot line and then along the front lot line, maintain an open quality, so that it's similar to what is currently existing, because I don't want to create a larger wall or to create more blockage. So it is kind of a question of trying to maintain privacy and just hoping that people can be respectful in their living environments and, trust that we can all be neighborly in some aspect. And also, again, that's just so that it provides more light and air, and that there's still kind of that you're not adding significant massing to that above the roof of the garage. So again, I can, that's one of the additional conditions that I'd like to add. And let's see. The garage, and I'm just reading through the additional conditions. Have you read the other conditions and accept them, or did you have any questions about the conditions that were in the staff report?
I don't know that I've seen the staff report.
Thank you, Ms. Kokinda. So just to clarify, there was only 2 conditions. One was because this is in an archaeological sensitivity area, then on the building permit plans, you reproduce the language as far as in the event of discovery of unanticipated resources. So that was condition 1. And then the second condition, which I did mention to you previously, in terms of staff supports for the roof deck, was that it is maintained as open yard in the future. Yeah.
Yeah. And let's see. I'm just reading through the garage roof deck. So the one condition you wrote in your staff report, the garage roof deck shall be maintained as open yard area on the property as supplemental to the non-conforming open yard behind the garage. The garage roof deck shall be maintained with low vegetative screening as noted on the plans, or with a low planter facing the interior lot line for the benefit of the property and adjoining properties. So that one likely needs to be altered because of I want to take out the mention of the vegetative planting, because I really don't want there to be, again, any kind of walls or impacts with that fencing. So we will likely be modifying that. So again, the intention, the first sentence is okay, but I'm going to strike the second sentence and include the other condition regarding the open fencing.
Okay.
Does that make sense, Ms. Plummer? Okay. All right. And then number 2, the unanticipated archaeological resources. And I can also confirm that that's the environmental review and make the findings related to that as written in the staff report. So that is my decision I know that, so Ms. Plummer, if you can communicate that to the Single Family Design Board as this project goes back. My decision is appealable within 10 calendar days, and any member of the Planning Commission could appeal my decision, or suspend my decision and pull it for the Planning Commission to review within that same time period. So thank you again, and I wish you well in your next steps, and hope that you can continue to reach out to the neighbors and work through some stuff. Thank you. And one last thing to note for the agenda today, again, just a reminder that the projects at 710 East Coda Street and 712 East Coda Street, items C and D on the agenda, have been postponed indefinitely per the applicant's request. So this concludes the staff hearing officer meeting today for January 24th. Thank you so much.